Nick Einach, world champion Freddie Spencer. He started the school in '97 that became and morphed into the Champions Riding School, which I'm lucky enough to teach. And we've both raced at our certain levels. And street ridden, you like to street ride, you got a VFR
Absolutely.
800,
Yes,
so
I
street
do.
rides
I do.
with the sweetie on the back.
Yeah.
And I wanted to bring to your attention, Freddie, somebody quoted you, and they put it in a book, that you would teach the throttle's open and you pulled on front brake against the throttle. And I wanted to get you on camera to talk about it.
Well, that's not true.
Good, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you never want to be accelerating and braking at the same time. It wouldn't be the first time that somebody wrote something that wasn't true, but no, absolutely not, Nick. I mean, you don't, because understanding you don't want to be driving the rear wheel at the same time you're slowing down the front wheel. So,
Yeah. Freddie talked about rear braking against the throttle in the 500. Why was that one of your keys to World Championship? Tell us about the 500, and what about it made you want to be in the rear brake and throttle?
The rear brake, as of accelerating, is different. And what Nick is describing is on a 500 Grand Prix bike, specifically the 84 bike, the first year of the NSR 500, that was the one with the gas tank on the bottom, the pipes over the top. The power band was horrible, which means for everybody who doesn't know how two-stroke fires, it can be peaky. It's called a peak, where it accelerates and then it has a little dip before it begins to maybe reaccelerate, even though you have the throttle on, and it will hit hard. There's a dramatic increase in power in a very short time. And so what I would do is I would, get the bike in, always front brake, all throughout front brake, get the bike turned and turn it so well that I want to pick it up, but to soften the transition through this peak, yes, I'd go to the rear brake. I had the brake pads shaved, you couldn't lock up the rear brake, but it would drag. And then I'd go to throttle in this peak, and then time picking it up, the power hitting, and releasing the rear brake. Because with that rear brake, it would help load the rear tire. I'd get more grip. That's different. That's a completely different thing. That's a technique to soften the transition of power, to help fix some of the inadequacies of riding this thing. So that's different,
We'll use a little rear brake on the FC1s.
Yeah.
They don't have traction control, just to control some spin sometimes, wheelie control over the hill at New Jersey Motorsports Park, a little bit of rear brake.
Help keep front end down.
Exactly. You run off, you can use a little bit of rear brake in the dirt. Street riding, we'll use the rear brake a lot because the front's rarely heavily loaded, except in a very hard stop.
Yeah.
And Freddie, I wanted to get with you because it's been extremely frustrating to hear people talk about this, and they named it throttle, front brake against the throttle, and I'll tell you, we've tried it. Of course we've tried it, right? The bike never...
That's ridiculous.
It never loads the front. It never slows down. It doesn't want to steer. And if you insist on it, it starts to lock.
Yeah,
because you got the rear driving.
Of course it is. Your rear's driving the front, and you're going to lock up the front brake, or front tire, excuse me, which basically locking up front brake, locking up tire skids. And again, it's interfering with the goal of using the front brake to not only slow the bike down, but to transfer weight as you roll off to quicken how it transfers weight smoothly, and then keep the load there. And the turning radius to change the bike's direction and slow the speed down on them all at the same time. Yeah. So the way I look at any technique, and this is, Nick, what from the beginning and when I was designing the program, was, okay, want to teach trail braking. What's the benefits? What is the goal of it? Well, and what's the downside, the pros and the cons, that I wouldn't even consider. Yeah. You've never heard me say it in the school. No. You've never heard me, even say it's acceptable under any circumstances. Again, the rear brake example of a very unique thing of skill with that's a skill, and I was doing it to try to fix something that the bike couldn't do, and actually make it safer, to more consistent that I could do. That's different, in that particular thing. But never would I consider recommending that or have it, and it's not something I would ever do.
Yep. I wrote an article about it. I think I went to every school of yours. I never heard Freddie say it. I wrote that article, but I'm just a guy talking, and here's Freddie Spencer saying.
Absolutely.
And he was misquoted. And if y'all will think about this, we accelerate because we can see the exit and take away the angle. We're accelerating. We pull the front brake on because we need to slow the motorcycle. To do those two together is insane. It's also very difficult to coordinate enough brake pressure with throttle open. So we're adding difficulty that actually goes anti. At our school, we say, and this came from Freddie, it has to work when the pace is up or the grip is down.
Right.
It has to work.
Right.
And that means a rainy day with your sweetie on the back. That means it starts to sleet on the way home. That could mean you're at the track going your personal best. The pace is up. It has to work then.
Yeah.
And so, riders, Freddie said something in the last 4 schools very interesting, and how you asked our students to practice the right things all the time.
All the time.
So if you're practicing front brake against the throttle, when it really counts, how's it going to work?
Right. And the thing is, how do you judge? Because throttle position, there's just no way that would ever be a correct thing to do, because you couldn't, predictability. Yeah. From the very beginning, Nick, and you know this because you're there, is our goal is to create consistency. Because what we want to do through that consistency is get more comfortable and confident. Again, so you can make better decisions. I always felt one of my strengths racing was my judgment, my ability to be able to make the right decisions under pressure. And so that's race management, right? And then to be able to adapt.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. To be able to adapt to the changing conditions, lap after lap, because especially with 2 strokes in those days, we laugh about it, right? Is the engineers would ask me, Freddie, on the front brake pads and things, you want in long endurance or feel? I would always choose feel. Then I would manage the brake because I wanted to trust it in every aspect of the brake pressure. Well, if I had a lever that was hard, but it would last, I didn't have good brake feel, it would be inconsistent, right? Well, that falls back into what you said with using the throttle and the brake at the same time. Is what if I misjudge my throttle position? That's ridiculous.
It's so hard to do.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So thank you, Freddie, for clearing that up.
Of course. Yeah.
I'll close with a thought, and we tell our students this is not a majority rules sport. If after my article, people wrote in, "Oh gosh, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I do this all the time." Who are they? Who are they? Riders, I'm not sounding snotty. You need to realize it's at the peak of the sport that we have to look. That's why it's called the Freddie Spencer School. It's why we call this the Champion School. What are the best riders in the world doing? Not what your uncle's doing on a perfect day, going 35 miles an hour on a 55-mile-an-hour corner.
Yeah.
It is what are the best doing. So if your friends say, "Oh, I use the brakes and the throttle together," if your uncle says it, if somebody on a forum says it, probably with a fake name, you need to realize that the world champion, the person who was misquoted, says absolutely not. We close the throttle completely to the brake lever.
Oh, absolutely.
We come off the brake lever to the throttle.
Right.
Do they almost overlap?
Yeah, they're close. When you do it correctly, yes. When you do it correctly, and Nick, when it started this, when I talk about, okay, what is it that the corner is controlling the speed in, using the brake pressure and direct change and body and all the things you learn, and then you control the exit using the throttle. You don't control the entrance using the brake and the throttle. No. They're 2 separate inputs.
Yeah.
Period. Yeah. Take that to the bank. Yes. Period. Yes.